Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. My name is Jess Nelson. I am the community manager here at PairTree, and PairTree is your hub for healthily navigating adoption every step of the way. We are so excited to have April join us tonight to talk about celebrating birthdays as an adoptee and how to help navigate some of those complex emotions. April is an adult adoptee and an adoption coach, and the founder of Mercy and Healing, where she offers her speaking, coaching, and writing services to help foster and adoptive families navigate challenges, educate them, and empower them to be better parents in service to their kids. April, we are so excited to have you join us tonight. I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what led you to start Mercy and Healing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be here and just share my heart with all of you. So thank you for listening and being receptive tonight. I really, really appreciate it. So yes, my name is April. The most pressing thing is I graduate in June with my bachelor's in human development and family studies from Oregon State. And so it has been so fun to go to college for something that I'm passionate about, and have the education to back up my lived experience has been so awesome. I am the sixth child of my biological mother. I am also the sixth adopted child of my adoptive parents. And I was also a foster sister growing up to over 150 foster children. My adoptive parents continued to do foster care after my adoption was finalized. And so I kind of, as I like to say, got to see kind of behind the curtain of the foster care system from a foster sister perspective. Now, my husband is a first responder. I have two beautiful girls. They're my biological girls. She'll be 7 on Sunday, my oldest, and my youngest is 4. And I'm also, like Jess said, a business owner. And so kind of what got me into this was I started sharing my story on social media. I just felt that I had a story to tell, and God wanted me to tell it. And so I just started sharing bits and pieces. Adoption can be very taboo. There can be a lot of one-sided opinions, and I just felt compelled to share the good, the bad, and the ugly about my story. And as I started to do that, it started to resonate with especially adoptive parents. They just started saying, oh my goodness, my child has been through the same struggle, or oh my goodness, my child is struggling with that right now. What do I do? How can I help them? And so my direct messages were blowing up, and I couldn't keep up in a way that I felt served adoptive parents in the best way. I just can't serve well over a DM. I want to know the ins and outs of your story. I want to know the ins and outs of your child's story so that I can provide the best guidance and the best help. And so that originally had me start Mercy and Healing LLC, start as an adoption coach. And so, yes, that's the majority of what I do there is adoptive parent coaching. And so again, anything from reunion. I'm currently in reunion with my birth father. That's another story for another day. Come back. But I can help you navigate that because I've been through it firsthand. And then I'm also going and doing the education piece of it to understand trauma and how that impacts the brain and all of the things. And so I can help adoptive parents navigate that. And what does that look like? And what do healthy boundaries look like? And give them the perspective of an adoptee in that very tough situation. That is now expanding into speaking engagements. I'm currently working on a memoir of my life as a foster sister and an adult adoptee. I'm also doing blog posts for people, and then I'm doing things like this, just facilitating support groups, coming in and sharing my story, encouraging adoptive parents, because it often can be a lonely, hard, difficult road. And there are a lot of roadblocks and also a lot of voices out there that can be discouraging, to say the least. And so to encourage, share the good parts of my story, share all the things that my adoptive parents did right, and then all the things that they could have improved on, so that adoptive parents can be the best equipped as possible to help their adoptees in the best way they can.
I love that. And one of the things that I love about you is how much you share the positive and the negative and the struggles with being adopted, because I feel like it's so easy to find the negative stories in this space and to just have your voice, willing to acknowledge that there is positives in your journey and your story, but also acknowledge and help other families walk through some of the negatives and the struggles and those obstacles to overcome, I think is just incredibly valuable in this community. And I'm so excited to be able to keep learning from you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think historically speaking, we've really the majority of the time we've heard the positive. Adoption is this wonderful, beautiful thing. It's amazing. Adoptees don't have loss. There's no grief. And I almost feel like we're completely flipping it on its head now and saying adoption is this horrible thing and needs to be disbanded. And I think, as most things in life, right, there is this happy medium where we can hold both of those and say, yes, there is loss. Yes, there is grief. There is heartbreak, but there's hope and there's healing and there's mercy too.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so excited to kind of get into what we're talking about tonight. You wrote a blog post for us earlier this month about celebrating birthdays as an adoptee because your birthday was this month. So it was super relevant for you to kind of write about your journey this month. And if you haven't read this blog post yet, head on over to our website and check it out because it's such valuable information. But we're also going to talk about it tonight. And as April is talking, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will either catch them in real time or catch them. We'll leave some time at the end to catch all the questions. And we're definitely going to get into more of the specific ways and tools to help navigate birthdays because April has some incredible tips and tools. But can you start with how you felt celebrating your birthday growing up and kind of how you came to acknowledge that something might have just felt a little off about your birthday each year and why birthdays can be difficult for adoptees?
Yeah, absolutely. Just going to flip my page of notes here. Yeah, so I always remember as far back, being 4 or 5, almost an anxiety come over me that week leading up to my birthday. And then the day of, a lot of disassociation, just like I wanted to pretend like it didn't exist. And of course, I didn't have tools to figure out what that was. I didn't have a place that I could go per se that was safe, that could help me figure out what was actually going on, try to get to the root of that. And so I just remember growing up, my birthdays to just be a time of angst and anxiety and just a place where it didn't feel good. That's, my 7, 8-year-old words. It didn't feel good. And also birthdays were never made a big thing in my family. Every family is different, every culture is different, but they were never a big thing. I never got a party. It was kind of another day. And so I'll kind of get into how that kind of exasperated my adoption wound in a little bit. So it took me really in my 20s when I started seeking professional help and seeking therapy and trying to put labels on these feelings and figure out where the root of them were. And so that is when, after I started therapy, after I started the healing process of realizing, oh, wow, I'm actually questioning a lot on my birthday. Like, does my bio mom know that today's my birthday? Does she remember? I didn't know if she was still alive. I had no contact with her growing up. I know she had 10 kids. So did she remember? What was this day when I was born like for her? I didn't have very many specifics around my birth. Was she okay after she gave birth? Where did she go afterwards? I'm not even sure where I was born. I've heard that I was born in the ambulance. I was born in the hospital. I'm not really sure. Was she ever going to come back? Did she even care? Did she care that I was alive? Was she going to come back and try to make a relationship with me? So it just was a time of angst for me. Like I said, I started to ask those questions, and that, as crazy as that might sound, started my healing process. Asking those hard questions, saying those things out loud, getting angry, screaming, crying, letting it out. So again, I could figure out, how do I really feel and where is that coming from? And so again, it is very common for adoptees to have low self-worth. We were abandoned. They didn't want us. These are some of our honest struggles. And so on our birthday of all days, we don't have any contact with birth family. Really? They don't care enough to show up. They don't care enough to send a card. Where are they? It is almost the lowest point for an adoptee oftentimes of wondering those really hard things and really struggling with self-worth. And so on top of that, having my birthday not be a big deal growing up, having it kind of just be another day, kind of confirmed to me, you don't really matter. Yeah, your mom left you because you're really not that important. Again, that was the start of healing, as crazy as that sounds. I had to go there. I had to jump into that pit and fully feel all of that to be able to start to climb out. And so, and I've heard this from so many different adoptees, I'm very plugged in that birthdays are a hard day. We struggle with those low feelings. We struggle if anyone cares. And that adoption wound of abandonment, it just, we're reminded of that. And so once I tackled that wound, once I got into therapy, once I learned to let all of that out, then I could start healing. Then I could spot, wow, my birthday's next week. I'm starting to feel a little anxious. Oh, it's because I'm really not feeling good about myself. I'm not feeling important. Okay, deep breath. You are loved. You are cherished. There are so many people who love you. I could start to combat the wound of adoption, the hard feelings, but I had to feel them first and I had to say them out loud before I could do that. So this past birthday, like I said, I found my birth father last year. And so I got a birthday card from him this year. It has been an amazing relationship that we've been able to cultivate over a year. And the peace that I feel, because not only is it my adoptive parent saying you're wanted, but darn it, he says, I love you and I'm proud of you every single time we talk. In that card, he writes how proud of me he is. And so that's another little offshoot that we could talk all night about is the validation from a birth family member is so important, and adoptive parents can do everything right, yet there will still be a wound and there will still be a need for biological family. And so, yes, this year was filled with the most joy. I've gotten really good at figuring out what do I need and telling that to my husband. He's been amazing at facilitating that, and also realizing my self-worth doesn't rely in how many people reach out, how special I feel. I am loved and I am cherished regardless of any of that.
I love that. When you were talking earlier about being, 4 or 5 years old and starting to disassociate a little bit and have those feelings of kind of angst and anxiety. I'm a birth mom and my daughter just turned 5 earlier this month. And so hearing that was just like, oh, is that how she's going to start feeling soon? But thankfully we have an incredible open adoption. So I try really hard to especially make her birthday super special, and try to be really present and FaceTime every year on her birthday. I've just moved 1,200 miles away, so I don't have that in-person connection. So this was the first year that I wasn't able to be there on her birthday, but I will definitely be reaching out to you as the years go on for help navigating that relationship. You kind of touched on this a little bit without using this exact phrase, but you touch on it in your blog post. You use the phrase, the body keeps score. And I know a lot of people in the adoption space hear that. Some people might not be familiar with it or understand exactly what that means. Can you kind of explain what it means when we say the body keeps score?
Absolutely. Yeah. So first, I want to give a couple resources, and maybe you could send these out, Jess. One of them is a really easy TED Talk. I think it's less than 10 minutes. I'm just a learner from all different platforms. So I do like to read, but I like to sometimes get a TED Talk in. So it is Trauma is Stored in the Body. It's a TED Talk. So that is the overall theme of all of this is trauma is stored in the body. It doesn't just disappear. It doesn't just, adoption is finalized and it erases all the trauma that might have happened before then. Trauma is stored in the body. And so the TED Talk, her name is Nadine Harris, and how childhood trauma affects health across a lifetime. And it is just so eye-opening to see how trauma affects physical health and physical health outcomes and how powerful that is. And so a lot of people think, well, I adopted a baby. Isn't that kind of a blank slate? Like we're good to go? There's no such thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I'm crushing that for you. There is no such thing. So you can have in utero trauma. I experienced that. My mother used drugs. And so the body keeps score of that. There is oftentimes a withdrawal process. The body keeps score of that trauma. The first thing they do when a baby is born is put it on mom's chest. In adoption, that's almost the complete opposite of that. They're ripping the child away from the voice and the motion that they've gotten used to for 10 months. And so one is acknowledging adoption is a prerequisite to it, or trauma is a prerequisite to adoption, realizing that there's no such thing as a blank slate baby. So then where do we go from there? Where's the hope? And so Nadine gets into a little bit of that. Also, the book What Happened to You by Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry is so good. I recommend audiobook because they go back and forth narrating the book, and it is so interesting. It addresses so many things, but especially why do traumatic events affect people differently? Why are some adoptees, quote, good to go? They seem like they're fine. Their story is all good. Why are some so deep in the pit and they can't seem to get out? And so it really addresses a lot of the things, intergenerational trauma, all the things, too many things to get into. So those are my two resources that I like to give to adoptive parents, especially just in starting to realize that trauma impacts the body. And so also, like I said, the separation, the trauma of separation, that is a really, that's real. That happens. And so Primal Wound is another book. It's a little outdated, so I don't always recommend it, but realizing there has to be trauma happen, or most of the time, in order for adoption to take place. Adoption is not the quote natural way of a family. You are being separated from your family of origin, from your roots, from your medical history, from the voices that you've heard. And hopefully now we're getting more and more open adoptions. And so our adoptees are having access to that to help combat some of that. But there still is loss and grief and just complete abandonment. And I'll send something over to you, Jess. It's a worksheet put out by Child Welfare. And it addresses the 7 most common effects of adoption on adoptees. And again, just like realizing that the feelings of loss and grief are common, realizing that struggling with identity is common for adoptees, then it helps you realize, okay, how can we help? And so that's where these books go into. Just they provide some practical tips, but again, just that general knowledge.
I love that. And kind of after we finish up today, we'll send out an email, and I'll make sure to include the links to both of those, the TED Talk and then the book that you recommended, just so that people have access to that. I feel like we could talk all day about the primal wound. That could be a whole nother conversation. Mm-hmm. April, you have some tangible ways that adoptive and foster parents can help support adoptees around their birthday. Do you want to walk through some of those with us?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I did cover these in my article, but a lot of times, I know on social media, I'll do a post, but then I love to jump on video and just kind of go into depth more about that. So the first one is name it to tame it. I first heard this in my professional counseling skill class by my professor, and it is so good. Again, I couldn't heal until I named it to tame it. I couldn't heal until I named those feelings and where they were coming from. And so as a foster adoptive parent, yes, your child may not be able to put their feelings into words. You know, there's a feelings wheel, another tool that kind of can help you uncover, okay, what's really going on. You're bored. Let's like dig into that a little more and figure out what's actually going on, but helping them put that into words. And so saying things like, I'm so excited it's your birthday tomorrow, but I realize there might be some hard feelings too. Maybe you're sad. I just want you to know that I'm here. I'm a safe place, even if it's a tough day tomorrow, even if you're so sad. And please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. For a younger child, that's even going to be too advanced. So just making sure the week of, day of, you're present, that you're making lots of intentional time for them, that you're sitting on the couch and cuddling with them, reading books, doing lots of things to promote connection so that their little bodies aren't going to be able to tell you, even I'm sad, but they'll feel that physical comfort. They'll feel that hug. They'll feel, okay, mommy's close by. I'm safe. It'll reinforce those safe feelings. So name it to tame it. That'll look different across every age. And that, again, is something I help foster and adoptive parents kind of walk through of how old is your child? What are they struggling with? Here are some tools, resources, help. Another idea, and that kind of goes with it, is don't try to fix it. So if you see your child's having a hard time, don't try to be like, oh, but you're okay. Like, you have so many people who love you. We're having an awesome party. Let them sit in that. And so if that means you have to cancel birthday parties, if that means that what they want changes last minute, being flexible. I'm a mom too. I get it. I have a big party planned for Saturday, but giving your child the space to do and say what they need to do. And so don't try to fix it. I'm a fixer myself, just letting them sit in their feelings, validating their feelings, and letting them know that you're a safe space for that, because that will spill over to every other hard emotion experience. And that builds trust with your child of, if I come to you with a problem, you're not going to try to fix it. You're not going to try to make it go away. You're going to sit here with me and you're going to build connection with me and you're going to love me. And so that's huge. Another one is give us information as you have it in age appropriate ways. And so I don't ever remember a pivotal moment when I found out I was adopted. I always knew. I don't really even remember that finding out my birth mother struggled with substance abuse. And so that is how it should be. Easier said than done. That we should raise our adoptees knowing they're adopted, knowing the details of their story in age appropriate ways. You're not going to tell a 2-year-old about substance abuse, but they might have some hard questions of, why am I not with mommy? Where's mommy? Whatever they might call, and saying, mommy's getting healthy right now, or mommy's having a hard time and we're just going to keep sending her letters, or we're going to keep sending her, or mommy just wasn't in a place to take care of you. And so we stepped in, but we have an awesome relationship with mommy. She's invited to your birthday. Just again, validating those hard feelings, validating those questions. And this, again, is another resource. One of my favorite books, Tell Me My Story, What Does Adopted Mean? By a very good friend, Raquel. She is a birth mama. She is a kinship adoption mama. So she adopted her sister. Starting out, I mean, when your kids are babies, reading them, seeing themselves represented in media is so huge. I read this to my girls and I started, and it opens up the floodgates. I got to make sure it's not right before bed. It opens up the floodgates of questions of, oh, you weren't in Nana's tummy. And again, it builds that safety, it builds that connection, and it builds that attachment with your child. So give us the information in ways that's age appropriate. Another tip is, my pages are sticking, is to allow us to celebrate how we want. And so I kind of said that a little bit, but that might be drastic from year to year. Just ask my husband. Some years I'm like, let's have a big party. And some years I'm like, can I just lay in bed today? I just want to lay in bed, really act like it's not going on. And he gives me the space to do that. And so letting your child, whatever that looks like, again, being okay with plans changing last minute, is so big. Making us feel special. So even if we don't want a real party, again, sitting with us, loving on us, getting us gifts, if that's our love language. I encourage you, find out your child's love language and then meet them in that, especially on their birthdays. If it's words of affirmation, make sure you're doing that extra on their birthday, whatever that is for your child in which they feel most loved and most wanted, do that on that day. And then include birth families on birthdays. Like Jess said, it's so important. My half sister that I grew up with and was adopted with, same mom, different dad. Her dad, grandfather, aunt, and grandma were in our lives, and they included me on birthdays. They sent me birthday gifts. They sent me birthday cards. And that was so huge. I think I have every single card I've ever been sent. Those are still some of the most precious things to me, because again, they told me I was wanted. I was loved. And so I am not an adoptive parent, so I can't imagine how hard that might be to allow space for biological family. when you just want to celebrate your child, and when you know that there probably is going to be some hard behaviors afterwards. But your child needs it. We desperately need our biological family. That is not something you will be able to replace. You can't love that want out of us. And so again, whatever that looks like, everyone's story is different. And again, that's where I can help give just individualized, if they really are unsafe, which I like to push back on that a little bit, because especially with today's media, get a PO box and write letters back and forth. Even if they never answer, you send it. You keep sending it year after year, because they might. So, I found my birth father at 28 and I didn't stop looking, and I can't imagine if I would have stopped, what I would be missing out on. And so whatever that looks like to you, to your child, to your family, but really stretch yourself on those days, on those birthdays, to include biological family in the greatest capacity that you can.
Absolutely. And even when it comes to involving birth families, even if you don't have, because I get this all the time, well, I don't know if they have the same address, or I don't know how to get in touch with them. Still get those habits in place, and especially let your kids see you putting that effort in, and writing the birthday cards, coloring the pictures, sending the school pictures. Put it in a Rubbermaid tote until you get to that day when that door is open again, or that line of communication is open again. Just because the adoption might be closed for one reason or another, it doesn't mean that you still don't value and hold space for your child's birth family in your life and in your home.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I found my birth father, I had sent him, like, I'm one of those people that keeps my Christmas cards from old years. I had sent him every Christmas card we had ever made. I sent him birth announcement. I sent him anything I could, because again, we went 28 years without each other. And so you never know, like you said, when birth family, and that doesn't just mean birth mom and birth dad. That means cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, whoever you can include, you do your best to do that.
So I'm a birth mom of two, in one open adoption, one closed. And my first daughter that I placed is 11 and closed adoption. But every year I write her a birthday card, a Christmas card, and like a letter. And I have a box of them for whenever that door opens again, whenever we can get in touch again. So that way she can see, I thought about you all of these years. I wrote to you every year. Here's one small way to kind of catch up on the time that we've lost. And it's not huge or insignificant or costs a lot of money, but it's little ways to keep those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to throw another resource your way. Post-adoption resources. It's by two adoptees. And so, it can be intimidating. It can be like, how do we even start this? And so they have a whole kit that you can buy that has prompts, that has like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I can have my child draw this. And then it also comes with a keepsake box that you can keep everything in. And so that's a great way. Like, I never want to act like I know it all and that it's easy. It's not. And so if you just don't even know where to start and it just seems like a really daunting task, that's an amazing resource.
It is. It's great. The worksheets are great. The monthly download guides are great. And it's a really not easy, but it's a great kind of all-in-one way to build and maintain those connections. And I love their kit that they came out with last year. And kind of in talking about all of these things, do you think that some or all of these can kind of be applied to other important days in adoption, like a finalization day? Because I know that day is a struggle for birth parents and adoptees as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So first of all, let's just get this out of the way. Please don't call it gotcha day, please. If you want to know more about that, you can just, I'm sure, hashtag gotcha day. It makes us feel like merchandise, I think, is the easiest way to put that. Like, we gotcha. It doesn't validate the loss and the trauma that came first. And so, yes, please don't have the whole sign gotcha. Even that is very, do we do the sign? Do we do pictures? What do we do? My adoption day was not, I couldn't even tell you on what day it was finalized. It was just kind of another day. And again, I would have liked to have some say if we celebrate, how we celebrate. And so again, take your child's lead on that, but absolutely expect tough emotions that day, expect tough behavior, expect tough questions. And if there are none, amazing. But then you're prepared so that if there ever are, you can create that connection with your child. That's always I would rather err in the side of connection, attachment, being present with your child and your adoptee, never caring about any of this. Then you'd be like, you know what? I think my adoptee's fine. We're good to go. Just another day. And then it being really, really hard. And again, you have not built that safe, connected, attached space for them to work through that with you. So absolutely, I think all sorts of hard days, really the trigger, realizing that I needed help was the birth of my daughter, becoming a mom myself. I remember just sobbing, holding her on my chest, like, how do you leave? How do you leave? I understand substance abuse is a disease and it affects the brain, but how do you leave? And that just catapulted me into depression and eventually seeking help, which in the long grand scheme of things, I'm thankful for, but it wasn't easy. And so, yes, sometimes it'll smack your adoptee upside the head when they're least expecting it, even on unquote normal day. And so, yes, absolutely being prepared and every day trying to create that safe, attached space for your child to let it all out. I was working with a client a couple days ago, and her adopted child had just had a visit with birth family, and he was just uncontrollable. His brain had switched to flight or fight mode. There's no talking sense into your child once that has happened. You are just there for them and you love them. And then afterwards, she was able to go in. But again, I reminded her, you're his safe place. I know that's sometimes the hardest thing to hear in these moments of really tough behavior, but he's letting it out. And what a beautiful, wonderful thing for him. Yes, it makes you want to rip your hair out. I'm a parent, I get that. But viewing it through that lens really helps you reorient. Okay, I'm going to just stay here with my child and I'm going to be here when they come back too.
When it comes to kind of creating that safe space that you talk about, do you think that parents should wait for their kiddo to say something to them about maybe having conflicting feelings around their birthday? Or is that something that adoptive parents should initiate that conversation or wait for it to happen?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So again, things like reading them this book should start as soon as they're born. And so I think as you build that safe place, as you build that attachment space, you'll know, like if your child is starting to have a hard time, you'll be able to notice the anxiety. Again, I always err on the side of bring it up. No, I'm not, mommy. I'm fine today. Really deep down, they're not fine, but they know, ooh, mommy sees me. And maybe I may not be able to put sad in my vocabulary this year, but next year I'll remember this, or the year after. So again, I always err on the side of attachment and over communication and over, just being present with your child, and also exposing them to people like them, whether that is an adoptee, whether that is an adoptee from a different culture. Like you really need to be immersing your child around people who have the same struggles. And that's part of what I'm going to do with my business is here in Central Oregon, start a mentorship program, because my sister, being raised with my sister, was one of the best parts of my story. She could empathize, not just sympathize. We could go through the 7 common effects of being adopted together. We could ask the hard questions. And not everyone has that. Not everyone is raised with a sibling. Not everyone knows someone that is adopted. And so seeking that out for your child, whether that's a friend, whether that's a mentorship program, whether that's if you're working with an agency. I'm a strong believer that they should help you find that community, help you talk to people who have adopted from their agency so that you not only have the support, but your child also has that support. And so they may also be able to help your child flush some of that out of, oh, wow, yeah, again, I did notice I was anxious on my birthday, but I haven't connected that yet. Oh, that's interesting that you say that.
Absolutely. I think community is so important for everyone in the adoption space, but it's easier for some people to find that community than it is for others. And so adoptive parents, if you're able to find those connections and those resources, then I think that that is just invaluable to your kiddos growing up. Um, does anybody have any questions for April? I think now's a good time to kind of open the floor for any questions that anybody else might have. Yeah, Camille?
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to join this session tonight. And April, thank you for your authentic share.
Mhm.
Confession, just as you were getting into the body keeps score discussion, a neighbor came out and was like, "Hey, let me catch you up on what's happening in the neighborhood." I was like, "No, I'm on a call." But could you just, and I apologize for those who heard it, but could you just kind of give me the takeaway from that point? Because it is a book that I plan to read.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just the main realization that there is no such thing as a blank slate baby, that most of the time trauma is a prerequisite for adoption, whether that's in utero trauma or just the separation of that baby, of that child from their family of origin. And so I often use the analogy, first thing when a baby is born, they place that on mom's chest. Adoption is the opposite of that, ripping that child away from the voice they've heard for 9 months, the movements they've heard for 9 months. And so really recognizing that there is trauma in adoption, and then the body keeps score of that. And so I think Jess is going to share a couple of the resources, but the TED Talk goes into that, how childhood trauma affects physical health for a lifetime. And so how do we help that? How do we buffer some of that? How do we, as adoptive parents, create those safe places for our kiddos to let out that hard stuff so that they can start healing?
If I may just quickly, and I want to give space for others to chime in, but thank you for that, because I will share authentically. I've been on the fence on whether I'm going the newborn route or the older child route. And um, my mother is of the belief that, well, if they're a newborn, they have no trauma.
Mhm.
And what you just shared, April, really speaks to, well, yeah, maybe they are not 5 or 6 in a household that's creating trauma, but it sounds like, just even from, if I understood correctly, what you're sharing is the separation from, as you put it, the voice that they heard, for 9 months, that in and of itself is traumatic. Am I off base, or is that a fair assessment?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, in all senses of the word, I am a domestic infant adoption. Yes, I was adopted out of foster care, but I went straight from the hospital to an emergency foster home for a couple weeks to my foster parents who would become my adoptive parents. So I didn't have any neglect, abuse, quote, visible trauma as a child. And so a lot of people are confused by that. They're like, well, why are you having such a hard time? Why are you asking all of these questions? Why are you so angry? And so again, being able to tie that back to, well, wait a minute, abandonment is trauma. It makes me feel like I'm unloved, like I'm unwanted. My birth mom couldn't even get it together to come back and visit me at least. All of the questions and the wonderings, and then the identity crisis that often comes later of, well, who am I? For me, my adoptive parents are 50 years older. I got, oh, is that your grandma and grandpa? I just got tired of answering that. Some kid asked me, oh, do you live in an orphanage now? And so even that this is a lifelong process with our adoptee. And so Unfortunately, there are instances for ignorant people to say some hurtful stuff. And so realizing, again, even in the best of circumstances, which I consider myself one, I am so thankful that I didn't bounce around foster home to foster home. I am so thankful that I didn't go with my birth mom because she lost the 5 others due to neglect. My sister almost died. And so again, I share even more so sometimes because, like Jess said, we hear the horror stories, we hear the 4 years of abuse and neglect. Mine is one of the better stories, and yet still there is trauma, and still this will be a lifelong healing process for me. So absolutely.
Thank you so much for that, April. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so many people think that the work in adoption is getting through the legal process of the adoption, connecting with an expectant mom, delivery, finalizing the adoption. But really that's not the hard part. The hard part is after the adoption is finalized, and then you're left to navigate this relationship, support an adoptee as they grow, build a relationship with birth family for the rest of their lives. That's when the real work begins. The adoption is the not easy part, but it's the much less difficult part than supporting and building these relationships that are going to last a lifetime.
Absolutely. I am so honest with prospective adoptive parents. I even have a list of questions for couples considering adoption to make sure they're on the same page, that they really realize this is a lifelong process they're getting into. And like you said, Jess, yeah, it is tough. It is tough to find an agency. It's tough for all of those things. But then the emotional and mental and just hard stuff does start. And again, that's a reason why I started Mercy and Healing, because there seems to be adequate support. Of course, we can always improve, but adequate support for those wanting to adopt, getting you up to the adoption day. But a lot of those just fall off once the adoption is finalized. And so I saw that gap and I attempt to fill it.
And you're doing a wonderful job. Erin.
Hey, this has been really great, April. Thank you. And just full disclosure, I'm Erin. I'm also the CEO and founder of PairTree. But I'm also a 2-time adoptive mom. And so I told Jess I just wanted to attend this as an adoptive mom and not a PairTree person because I wanted the learning. But and to be totally honest, I'm kind of just sitting here with a bit of a pit in my stomach because I know how true your words are, but as an adoptive mom, I just want to take all the pain or any of that kind of away from my kiddos. And I realize that I can't take it away. And instead we have to kind of run towards it and deal with it. And so one, thank you for being so open and authentic in terms of your own experience. But one of the questions that I have, which I was completely unprepared for as an adoptive parent, that it didn't even cross my mind to think about this, was we've adopted 2 kiddos from different families. So they're not biologically related. Obviously they're brother and sister and they call each other siblings and everything, but they're 2 really different relationships that we have, both open, but one is extremely open and one is an email once a year. And for my own, edification, I'm curious, like when you remember earliest age that you remember even having some kind of pangs of like, and knowing that you had kind of a different experience being raised than your siblings. I am trying to kind of treat them as 2 individual people that are going to have their own individual journeys versus like, lumping them in like, well, Abby started feeling this way when she was 6 or, that kind of thing. So I'm just curious about your thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it was tough. And again, I wasn't really allowed or able or have a safe place to even say that. So again, when I was 20, that's something I had to work through in therapy and name it to tame it. It was tough. Now, what made all the difference was her family including me. And I know that is completely out of our control, unfortunately, as adoptive parents. But it just is so tough. And it is so, like you said, running towards the pain, realizing again that with adoption and even biological kids, right? Like raising biological kids isn't a walk in the park, but especially with adoption, it's a whole new set of challenges. And so yeah, just doing your best to realize this is going to be really tough. And that does suck. And letting your child voice, well, why does my brother or sister get that? And I don't get that. That's not fair. Letting them voice that. And also then being maybe able to say, you know what, mom, like I need an extra big party this year. Like this really, really sucks. Looking back, now that I've done the healing, it doesn't hurt so bad. And so that's where the hope is in adoption, is that by creating these safe places for our adoptees, by letting them intermingle with other adoptees with tons of different stories, by finding my biological father and seeing that he cared the whole time, he just had no idea I existed, no idea, was crucial for me. And so looking back, I can see all the healing that has happened, but absolutely it was tough. It exasperated that primal wound of, well, my sister's dad is in her life. Where's my dad? Where's my grandma? Where's my grandpa? Do they not care enough? And again, validating those, you are loved, you are cared for, you are wanted so badly. And at the same exact time, I can't fill all those holes for you. And there may be holes. I did a post a little back of, you never arrive. And I think that can apply for so much, but especially for anyone going through healing, dealing with trauma, is you never arrive at a fully healed version of yourself. So as the adoptive parent, to give yourself grace, to give your adoptee grace, and to realize that this is really tough and we won't figure it all out. But again, letting your child voice that sucks, that they get contact and all I get is an email once a year. That stinks. That does stink. You're right. That does suck. Letting them voice those is so big.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Lauren, I saw you had your hand up.
Well, Erin, my mom and her brother are both adopted, and they kind of had a similar situation. In the 40s and 50s, of course, everything was closed and they didn't really have birth records to go back to. But my uncle did get to find his birth parents. He grew up knowing his biological grandparents, and my mom never got that. She was also treated very differently by her adoptive parents. But, mom has always talked to me about her experience as an adoptee and been very open about her feelings about different things. But my brother is also adopted. We've tried to have, the kind of open relationship. He's a closed adoption, so he has not reached out to his biological family, but we as a family have tried to encourage him to talk about it. He's known he was adopted since birth. It's just been, a topic of conversation his entire life, but he's also a very angry little guy. And when we do try to ask him about his feelings about adoption, specifically his and other things, he always just says, I'm fine. And I'm wondering, should I push to get more information? He's 33. Do I just take it at face value that he's fine when I think it's pretty evident that he's not? Do I continue to try to have conversations with him, especially since I'm trying to adopt? I want to know how to talk to him about these sort of things and continue to be open with him, even if he's not interested in sharing now, because I know that I'm going to have a similar relationship with a child in the future, or at least I hope. And, maybe we can have more conversations, but how would you go about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Something I really encourage anyone who knows someone who's adopted, which is actually more people than you think. Again, adoption is such an individual thing. There are so many moments in my life where people told me, you need to talk about this, or you need to get over it, or you're fine, or, what's going on. I had to get there myself. Things that helped me were people loving me unconditionally, people who respected that I didn't want to talk about things, people who I knew if I did want to talk about things, I could call them and it would be a safe, unbiased way and person to go to talk to. And so that's just my encouragement in it is I would continue to love him. I would continue to reassure him that you are there. But I wouldn't push it, if that makes sense. I would, absolutely, like the kind of the things I talked about tonight, just doing the things to just connect with him. Like, what is he interested in? Hey, let's go grab a beer. Let's, just building relationship, connection, and attachment. I think all adults need that too, just as much as children. And then if and when he's ever ready, he'll come to you. And if and when he's not, then just respecting that and saying, okay, that's his journey and something that maybe he won't ever come to me, but maybe he will come to someone else. Maybe he'll go to a therapist, or maybe he'll meet someone who is adopted and he'll build a relationship with them and share those things with them. So yeah, kind of the short is I would just focus on loving him and building connection and attachment with him.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know this might be a little, not necessarily off topic, but for families that have a mix of adoptive and biological kiddos, and adoptive parents wanting to really lean in and support adoptees around their birthdays, how would you kind of recommend families navigate that when, you might possibly be needing to make a bigger deal of an adoptee's birthday and not necessarily a biological kid's birthday? How would you recommend families kind of navigate that dynamic in their home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have the foster sister perspective too. My parents did foster care and they took a medically fragile infant. So that is where the majority of their time, effort, and resources went. There was a lack of emotional connection. There was a lack of safe space for me to go to. And so it definitely was breeding grounds for resentment, unfortunately, something that my mom and I have since found healing and amazing relationship in. But it was tough growing up, realizing, wait a minute, I'm over here struggling too. And so I think we have to be really careful when we have permanent kids and foster kids and biological kids and adopted kids and all of the different array. We do our best to treat all of our kids similarly, right? But that will look different. That will look different for a biological child and an adopted child. And so again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but we strive to do the attachment and the safety and the connection with all of our children. And yes, that is going to look different. That's going to take different parts of us. But, I think if you say to your adopted child, hey, I see you're struggling, is there anything that we can do? Oh, you need an extra big party this year? Awesome. Then you try your best to do that across the board. Or you say, you know what, next year, let's do a big party for you. Okay. Like I want to really be able to focus on you next year. I even balance that with both of my kiddos who were both my birth girls of, oh, I want this year. And I'm like, well, you know what? We can't afford 2 big parties. So this year's her year and next year will be her year, or let's do a family trip instead. And so absolutely, there are different needs that adoptees have, but that connection, safety, and attachment applies across the board. And you do your best. You listen to your permanent kids, you listen to your adoptees. I'm a big advocate of that if you do have permanent kids, whether that's adopted kids or biological kids, and you're looking to adopt, they should have a say in that. They should be able to, if you're doing foster care, say, hey, I need a break from kiddos coming in and out. It is a family decision to adopt. And so if you already have kiddos in the home, of course, age appropriate, you let them have a say, not to say that you go with all of their wants, desires, and needs, but you take that into consideration so that, you know what, we have 4 kids. Are we really going to be able to adopt in a way that honors the adoptee while also honors my permanent kiddos that I already have? Am I able to realistically provide everyone with the things that they need? Now, absolutely, there was awesome things as growing up as a foster sister. I learned compassion. I learned that when we have much, you are to share that. And that's amazing. Those are things that I still try to instill in my girls. But yes, there is a different dynamic there, and making sure that everyone feels heard, everyone feels safe, everyone feels connected, even though that might look drastically different year to year, moment to moment, day to day.
April, you have just given us so much advice and wisdom and insight tonight. I can't thank you enough for being with us and sharing with us. Oh, Erin.
That's just a hand clap. That's not a raised hand. That's just
Clap.
applause. Thank you, April.
I
Thank
second
you.
that. Thank you so much for joining us, April. You can find April over at mercyandhealing.com if you are interested in booking a one-on-one with her. I'm going to drop her website in the chat, and I will also link it in the follow-up email with the resources that she mentioned. And April, thank you so much. I can't wait to do this again.
Yes, thank you so much. And yes, I will be back. I have so much to share. And so, yes, thank you. The fact that you guys are here tonight shows that your hearts are just so open to this journey, to listening to adult adoptees. And that just means the world. It means the world to us adult adoptees, wanting to make the path a little smoother and a little straighter for those adoptees coming behind us.
Well said. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I hope you all have a great night, and we will see you again soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.